Barbara had wrote, and he tweaked it, so I'm very thankful for that, because it's been a lot of years trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing here, and so I'm not really good at bios, because it completely changes constantly. You know the feeling?
Yes.
Well, and I want to make this perfectly clear. I am from Dallas, Texas, but I am originally from Arkansas. Is anybody here from Arkansas?
Born there.
Y'all said born there, so you're not going to be offended by saying this, but I was raised a hillbilly. And most of my life we grew up in a King James only environment. I am a Baptist Pentecostal. What that meant is we had enough Baptist in us to believe whatever they told us and not question it, but we were Pentecostal enough that we believed that we're going to have fun anyways. If there was no wildfire, there was no fire. So I grew up in that environment. My uncle is a Assembly of God pastor. He's retired now. My dad was United Pentecostal, and we were at a place in California, that's what they tell me, and they couldn't find a church, so they went to the Assembly of God church, and I went forward at an altar and experienced awakening love. The theme of this conference is Awakening to Unconditional Love's Energies and the Divine Order of the Universe. I love that title. That looked good on a CD, you know what I'm saying? I have all these big titles. You know, I was in Word of Faith movement. We didn't have fonts back then. So you had to write my title all the way around the thing till you got to the end of it. So, awakening unconditional love's energies. I experienced the baptism of awakening love that for the rest of my life, as I was conditioned to what I was taught as Baptist Costal, I had very serious questions and very serious doubts about the things that I heard about in the Bible. Not only did I have the whole common sense thing going on, but knowing that you had experienced a God, and yet I could never connect to that. I remember 11, 12 years old, I tried to do a repeat, so I went to the altar, and then my dad, you know, here we're Pentecostal, and his Baptist kids, well, you don't do that. You've been saved one time, you can't get saved again. I said, okay. Like, I understood what that meant at 11, 12 years old.
Yes.
Saved. If they don't say it like saved, then it's not the same. Saved. So, you know, I grew up 14 years old, had too much pizza late at night, realized I was called to the ministry. The love returned, and so I decided to pick a church that had good music. It had nothing to do with whether or not they knew anything about the Bible. They had real cool music. And I wanted that because, you know, I grew up in Pentecost where we all use hymns. And Lynn had mentioned about emotionalism. You know, there was a certain song my dad always said that if they sung that song, he knew it was God. It don't take very long to realize that if you run by song, they're going to play that song. We went to a church in Mississippi, and their song was Jesus on the Main Line. And it was dead. I'm talking dead. And about 30 minutes in, someone said, come on, play the song. Jesus on the main line, tell them what you want. And they go crazy. They were all waiting for that song. I got sick of that song. I said, how come the Holy Spirit can't move till this song gets sung?
That's their song.
I had so into emotionalism. I mean, and half the Pentecostal songs we sung, because I wasn't educated, we were not singing them right. Bringing in the sheets or something, I don't know. I sang those songs for years. We didn't even know what Canada was. I said Canada language. My cousin, y'all think that's what my cousin said, why do you always sing about Canada? But then, when I got called to the ministry, I got to church, and they gave me something called a timestamp, and they time-stamped every verse in this Bible. And they said, you can have this, but you got to wait until. Yep. You can have the fullness of God, but until. I got sick of until. I'm going to rip that one out. But they ripped half of their verses out anyway.
Yep.
You know, they always told me Baptists had to rip the part out about tongues. I'll rip until out. And I remember meditating, walking down the road, and I said, look, God, I've got some confusion here because you telling me I can walk in your fullness, but I got to wait on this crapture thing or what it's supposed to be happening. I was confused. So I had a problem with time, and that's one of the issues I had. I had issues with law. I hated law and I hated time. And so I had a messed up book for a long time. And I remember all the while, these little bitty things that happened, and this is no lie. I'm jumping all the way to my point. I remember thinking, I am a complete failure as a charismatic. All the doors are shut. The devil has took over. We can't get enough people praying, interceding, spiritual warfare, and yet right in the middle, a door would open up that equipped me for what I'm doing right now.
Amen.
Well, that was confusing, wasn't it? Because you're sitting there thinking, I have lost my mind, and God would open a door where I could research and dig in the original languages, and yet everything else wasn't going on. And then you started telling them what you found, and then they say, you crazy, so you couldn't preach no more, so you had more time to research, and it was a holiday. I remember those days too well. But the problem I had was I was trying to serve God and have a ministry in an age that was no longer serving us. But I didn't get it. You know, I was in charismatic ministry. I was in Word of Faith ministry. I rubbed my roots. I thank God for all of that. There's not one part of me, and you know, some people, they hear the old stuff and it really freaks them out or frustrates them. But it don't frustrate me because there is such a gratitude. There's no bitterness here, the journey I've been through. Now, I will be honest with you. I am a recovering hillbilly fundamentalist. I am a detoxing, and I have now moved to Dallas, Texas. You know, that's Baptist land, and they're trying to make me a redneck fundamental. So I'm not a hillbilly or a fundamental. But I do get the fact that we have to understand that most of what we have went through was to bring us to this point. And we cannot in any way criticize or judge or even look at those people because we are on the brink of something so great. Yes. How dare we have books available to us at our fingertips that for thousands of years men knew was possible and they couldn't get their hands.
Yes.
How dare we not read them? How dare we not explore them?
Amen.
And so I'm excited about where I'm at.
Yes, thank you.
It's interesting. They've now come and talked to me, and I'm just going to be real forward with you about it. But I order so many books that Amazon has now in the Dallas Metroplex decided that they're going to start delivering by vans. And when I drive a trash truck, and I see this van that says Amazon. But I order from Half Price Books, Better World Book. Why can't I have my own van? And then I saw something that was really neat. They told on TV that they're going to start using drones.
Yep.
Now I'm going to have an Amazon drone. I'm going to have a Half Price. It's going to look like a war over my house. And then I thought if I could get my own, I'll put my own NASCAR sticker on there. I called up my friend Mike Clegg the other day and I said, and I haven't talked to him because he's remodeling his house. Not that he wants me to tell all this stuff on TV. But anyways, I was talking to him and I said, listen, I just need to let you know something. I said, I am wanted in questioning by the police and we're connected. So I want you to know he got real quiet. I said, they have questioned me because I'm stalking the Amazon book drivers that's going around. They don't use UPS anymore. They do it themselves. And I see them everywhere. I said, man, look at this. It books everywhere going everywhere. But what a day to live. And it's not just about information. It's about a transfer of energy.
Yes.
What is the purpose of
Yes.
these conferences? You can get the books, you can get the tapes, you can get the CDs, but what is it like to be in a room with the open-minded people and find a synergy?
Yes.
And know that you're connecting with people and laying a foundation for a reset that's fixing to happen, in which these CDs and these videos and all the stuff that Kirby's doing is going to be sought after, because we're about to see the world turned upside down. We're talking about economical, spiritual awakening. You don't think that's not going to affect stuff?
Yes.
It already has.
Yes.
I'm going to read you some quotes. There's a guy named Al Dillinger, and I don't know who this guy is, I don't know if he writes books, but it says, one day we will feel the impulse to leave our nets, surrender all things and thoughts and laws of this world, and trust the mind of Christ to provide our infinite good. Will we follow? Will we stay behind or coast along in the limited mind of man? Now that's cool, you can put that on Facebook. Robert Pilato, Life is But a Dream, says it's only the finite mind that complains about the slowness of spiritual progress, never the consciousness that you are. Be alert enough to see the finite mind appears as a wolf in spiritual clothing. One of the areas that we have is, well, why hasn't this happened yet? And I believe it's because we don't understand times, and we don't understand law. And when we begin to have this revolution about time, we start understanding that many of our ideas about time are no longer serving us. Because most of our judgments are caught in contrast. And may I submit to you today that I don't want you to no longer fight your contrast. I want you to learn to dance with it.
Amen. Yes.
People always ask me, Mark, are you Trinity or oneness? I say yes and no. Robert Pilato in Life is But a Dream says, when you realize that you are the consciousness that God individualized, you'll realize there is no reason to keep that consciousness entombed in a dream of separate self in a world of good and evil. Who told thou that thou wast naked? King Jimmy there. Instead, you open their consciousness to receive the grace of God in silence and in stillness. You serve God, therefore, by keeping your mind free of a belief in material powers, and you're able to behold as grace unfolds in your life. I don't know where these quotes come from, but I found them on an email, so I did it. Most of us in this room have been in a study of what's called metaphysics. And I thought this was interesting. My study today will deal with time, space, and cause and effect. There's a lady present that wrote this on her Facebook, and I thought it was cool, so I'm going to quote it. Oh, I finally figured out who I am. A person who studies metaphysics is called a metaphysician. The metaphysician attempts to clarify the fundamental notions by which people understand the world, existence, objectives, objects, and their space-time, cause, effect, and possibility. Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with the first principle of things, including abstract concepts such as knowing, substance, cause, identity, time. That sounds like us, doesn't it? I stole that from Barbara Simons, wherever she's at. We are involved. Yes. Amen. Royalties. Here is the world in which we live at. A few years ago, this man here, Richard Rohr, wrote a book called Things Hidden, Scripture is Spirituality. That book was full of references to many people, including Walter Brueggemann, who forwarded the book. You know, most people never read this book. A year later, he took all the quotes out of it, wrote the book, The Naked Now. It's the same book, almost word for word. And people got it. Look at The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and look at The New Earth. We don't even realize that most of what we are saying to people, it's not us, but all it has to do is be said in a different way, and it's transformed.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Because whether you realize this or not, most people don't get it the first time, they don't get it the second or third time. but because you were saying it in a different way. And that completely revolutionized Richard Rohr, because all of a sudden he's talking to a completely different audience about the stuff that he'd been talking about for years. And when I saw this, I thought it was interesting because on page 11 of this book, read you what he said. It's interesting, I marked the thing and then I can't get the book open. Isn't that interesting? He says in this book right here that it is the dance of inner authority and the dance of outer authority that begins to merge, that we begin to understand Scripture. The dance of inner authority and outer authority. Yet, in Greg Braden's book, Fractal Time, he talks about the dance of fractal time. So what does it mean when we are no longer just listening to and moving beyond our traditions, but we begin to really experience what it means to let go, to listen, and to love? And this right here is a tricky one because we all think that we listen. You know, my wife always tells me, Mark, you don't listen to a word I say. It's not that I don't listen, I don't comprehend. Because, I know this sounds crazy.
Well, I need to write that down.
It's going to be on YouTube. But listen, I'm giving the finger. I understand what she means because I get my head so caught up in Greek and Hebrew that I'm not thinking in English.
Yes.
I know Lynn talked about thinking in English. May I submit to you that most of us don't know how to think, more or less think in Hebrew, not Greek. Because we live in a philosophical mind. We live in a world in which everyone thinks in Greek. What is Greek? You examine it, you dissect it. And when I was listening to the brother last night, the one thing that really kind of connected with me is I thought, man, how many times have I heard a concept and never heard them? Oh yeah, honey, I know what you're talking about. Go over there and do this. No, listen. What does it mean to really listen and understand the intent of what a person says? But I understand because I live in a concrete jungle and they all drive crazy. And I drive with them. So it's like I'm never out of my office and then I get someplace like this. You know, I've been here since Thursday. And all I want to do is I look stoned on the back still reading books. This is great, man. I'm going to like Cheech and Chong when I preach up here. But what does it mean to wake up in time? And I want to tell you this. There are two things that saved my life. I grew up in Word of Faith movement. You know, Charles Capps, Kenneth Hagin. I have nothing against, I don't criticize where I come from. But the thing that centered me was beginning to think in Hebrew thought. Because there was a time in which we were told, Mark, you need to renew your mind to the Word of God. So I started reading books on the mind and got in trouble. How am I supposed to renew my mind and not read books on the mind? And yet half the people who read the books on the mind were metaphysical or philosophical, which they were quoting the same people that I was reading in the Greek books, but we can read that book and not that book. That's duality. In fact, I was so poor, I would go to the library and just read every book I had in there. I used to have, when we first moved to Dallas, I was in overload, right? Because I had a pickup. It was a little Ford Ranger, and I had that sucker loaded full of books. And Kay said, when are you going to read them? I said, I don't know, but I literally had books that when I turned the corner, they'd run over me. Now, why was I doing that? Because there was a quest in me just to dig into research, and I didn't have some of the materials that we have now. And so I'm hungry and thirsty, and you just read, and it doesn't make half of it make any sense. But then now I'm hearing people, hey, you ever heard of a certain author? Yeah. Thank God for libraries. What's this got to do with time? Well, I'm getting this. Turn the page. Most of what you think about issues like the soul determines how you look at time. Because most of us don't even realize that we have a concept that time is this thing right here. And we say, okay, that's an illusion. But we must understand that everything's energy. For years of my life, this is the way I saw things, and I have 2 CDs back there, by the way. One's called Out of the Box and Exploring the Mysteries of God and the Anatomy of Time, in which I go into this in more detail, because I'm going to start where I left off, because when I talked to Nick, he asked me to talk about time. So, I'm going to say this right now, no pun intended. Because I'm going to say a lot of things about time, and you say, I ain't got enough time to talk about time. Anyways. The only thing I knew as a Pentecostals, we didn't have any. We're going to be raptured out soon. That's a circle, y'all. Y'all like that circle? That's a circle. I am not the artist in the family. That's Lynn's a better artist than I am. Are y'all having fun?
Oh, yeah.
Good. That's all that matters.
Perfect.
Y'all can get serious with all the other teachers. They bring me in there for fried chicken. I had a pastor tell me one time that I was building a graveyard of dead chickens. That's not funny. Man, there's an energy or something up there. Because I don't know where in the world that comes from. That's a new one, Lynn. I don't know where that comes from. There are 3 Greek words translated as time in your New Testament. I'm going to give them to you separate so you'll get the picture here. This is the word aeonian, and there's different forms of it. Let me write this a little bit. We've had some good conversations, me and Nick, about this.
On the floor. It's on the floor.
I knocked it down. You know, I don't feel guilty, but you know, there's times I get in these meetings and I have so much fun. I have to actually stop. This is not struggle. Do you catch yourself effortlessly enjoying God? And does it not freak your brain out? It does mine. I was always thought, boy, when God gets done with me, I'm going to be miserable. I'll be in His will. Greek word for chronos. And here's the thing that blows my mind, because Greek scholars tell you, and I've seen a prominent minister on TV, yes, I watch television evangelism, don't throw things at me. Hey, when they start talking about red blood moons, I'm like, what has happened? What happened, man? Listen, let me tell you. There's an awakening going on this planet, and the very person you think ain't getting it is going to start getting it.
That's right.
We got to be careful about judgment, man, because we cannot realize how much this planet is waking up.
Yes.
God will use a television evangelist.
No.
But this word chronos has been used, and they point at their watch. I say, wrong answer. Because chronos is not even set up on what we call natural time or illusion time, but what my wife refers to in the book Awaken Reality as psychological time. Because what this time is referring to is what the feast and the Feast of Israel and Leviticus, which is set upon the zodiac. So chronos is this. And then this Greek word here is the word age. It's not forever. Now there is an adjective that describes divinity. And this is where people get mixed up, because they don't compare and do contextual studies. They don't go verse by verse, like Lynn did on the Hebrew word for man. we have a generation that is consumed with versititis. You know what that means? Let me give it to you. They're verse damned. They damn everybody one verse and don't read the context. Who got these chapters and verses in this thing anyway? Then you have this word, kairos, which is the present moment. Now, how does this line up to this? Well, for years I read a book by James Barr. Let me set this up right. They had what was called Gramcord, and it was a Bible computer in Chicago. They trained the computer to do what they did. A long process so that the computer would do in seconds what took them hours of research. Lynn Hayes needs one definitely. But somebody knows how to build him one, do it. When they put the words for time in, the thing popped back and said, your answer is wrong, this is the answer. One of those answers was, aeonian doesn't mean forever. This so freaked them out, they started to go back in history, and the only man that they could find that kind of thought this way was a man named James Barr, who wrote a book called The Semantics of Biblical Language. By the way, John and Suzanne Wade has created a list right here of some books that I've mentioned. And after the deal, you can get you a copy of this and start looking these books up.
Thank you.
Thank y'all, because she asked me, hey, about this, and then I went for 6 months and then emailed her out of Kobo, so thank you. But James Barr wrote a book called The Semantics of Biblical Language, which did not look at stuff in chapter and verse, but looked stuff up in paragraphs. That's one of the reasons the Message Bible has no chapters and verse. Now somebody's come along and did it again, so they make it connect to Strong's or something. He wrote a book called Biblical Words for Time, and he said when these words were by themselves, they had distinct meanings. But when they were used together, like there are times that these two words are used together, they create a cluster, which means these definitions combine based on the text. So I'm reading this one day and I said, how's that possible? And then it dawned on me. This right here, this whole thing that we call the zodiac, the whole thing is the universe, which we have the Greek word cosmos.
Yes.
That in the world and not drinking or chewing or hanging the girls that do. But I'm from Arkansas, so read between the lines. Not you, honey. So how can chronos, which means a cycle of time, meet up with kairos? And it dawned on me, the only way it could do it is when these would come through here and these would line up. So when I read these definitions, now you have another word. Jesus said you don't know the hour or the time. Now is the time is the word hora, which is the natural cycle, what we would refer to as psychological time. That's the one that's the illusion. But when you understand Hebrew talks about something called olam, which means it's out of time. Now, how does this line up? Because when you begin to understand time, you understand that God's chronos, God's timing in your life is not based on this. It's not even based on the sun. It's based on the whole zodiac, which we removed from theology, and then we want to study the feast, and yet the feast, the law, and all that totally was dependent on it. That's why in the Sabbath, you could do something one day and be fine, and the next minute it would be unlawful. And man come along, locked everything down, created a Catholicism law, a Catholicism stuff. And you know, listen, you don't think that... They now did a recent interview of a man who's at the Vatican, who is their astronomer. And he's finding stuff out that they don't like.
Very true.
And you'd be surprised where I found some of those books. So, what is this? Okay, so now... This over here, okay, imagine Lynn Stickman really blown up. This is what is called the heart chamber. Yes. And you have the soul, and you have the ego, which is the heart. Yes. In the last little while, I began to challenge, why is this definition so difficult? There is 14,000 definitions of the soul. I remember being so confused because I grew up with Kenneth Hagin and Kenneth Copeland, the soul was the mind, will, and emotions. Then I got metaphysicals, no, you are a soul, you're not a spirit. No, your spirit has a human experience. I got so confused. But what we did not understand, and this one, you know, if you read a book and do a search on that book and it says, get rid of your ego, 98% of the book, that means whoever wrote the book's got an ego problem. Why not? Because in charismatic books, I read a whole book that would be this big, and they didn't mention the word God hardly but 2 times. The devil was the whole deal.
Yeah.
You know how come I had so much time to research? Because I quit chasing the devil years ago.
There you go. You got that right.
I'll give you this. Y'all might not like this, but I was good at it. I could find stuff. I didn't read Hebrew. I was tasting the thing. And then I decided I was going to write a book called A Scholarly View of Spiritual Warfare. I got into Greek and realized it was all a bunch of crap. So, how do these relate? Because what we have to understand that in the realm of the soul is where time and timelessness meet. And if we don't understand nothing about the zodiac, I gotta write zodiac on here. Then what we try to do is we try to understand, define this without this, not understanding that the law and time is all based on this. And yet most people, even today, when you mention the word zodiac, it freaks them out.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, brother, you just done went off of it. I remember reading Greek books in the 80s who said that in Ephesians 6:12 was an astro theology verse. And it was a Baptist Greek scholar. Now, how did he know that? And if he's not supposed to have anything to do with astrology, how did he know it? But yet I'm quoting his Greek book. I don't know what to do with all that. But in this realm of the soul is where time and timelessness meet. And what do we say duality is? Duality is this or that. I can answer to you every ultimate theological question you've ever had. You know what it is? Paradox. Conundrum. Yes and no. Is there a now time? Yes. Is there eternity? Yes. But both of us are experiencing things that blows our definition of time. Because the more we walk into ascension and we begin to walk these things out, the more we understand that our concept of time is not only leaving us, but time itself is collapsing. You feel like you're being pressured into a, talk about get out of the box. I mean, I got out of the box only to realize I was in a circle. Hebrew thought. It's time. That's Hebrew thought. Greek thought is linear. And yet, almost all of our mathematical and science for years has all been linear. I have a friend of mine who's an engineer, and his friend, and he did not know about what we were going to talk about. He said he went in there one day and his boss said, look, you know that box y'all been using called linear time? He said, I want you to get rid of it. I want you to burn it. And they begin to study science. See, science has taken the freedom to think outside of the box. Philosophy has, but we're still got people up in the church who are scared to think, more or less thinking Hebrew thought.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Let me read you a quote.
It's at the bottom, of course.
I got this quote from Nick. John, I'm going to have my wife as assistant. I'm just kidding. I was going to come out here in my apostles. I used to be a part of the Church of God in Christ. I was going to come out in my robe and all that, but I said not to. John Archibald Wheeler said, time is just a construct of the universe to keep everything happening, to keep everything from happening all at once. I want you to follow this thought. Time is just a construct of the universe to keep everything from happening all at once. Time, which you think, just like Lynn said about the ego is a gift from God. Let me tell you, time is a gift from God. Because if you had full exposure to what you're seeing now, you couldn't handle it.
No, sir.
Yeah, right.
Not only could you handle it, but there's a major difference between an idea and a concept. And most of the world thinks Christianity is a concept. Idea, concept. Do you know where most of your judgments come from? Concept. How could we think in everything that we have discovered, in everything that we search, that we have somehow reached some level of understanding, when in reality, I am standing here in gratitude because I know the depths we haven't even trod yet. Listen. Now, I'm going to add some touch to this. So, Greek scholars, when I got in UR, Universal Reconciliation, all they want to talk about is aeonian. They want to talk about kairos or chronos. There's another word for time. It is this Greek word, kainos. And you have it's kainos and nous. Most of the time, these words are translated, and there's another derivative close to that. These words are translated as new and renew. May I submit to you, there is no difference in God between new and renew. Because most of what we think new and renew is only has to do with time. Oh, I tell you, I went down that altar and I renewed my salvation. No, you didn't. You renewed your perception of what salvation was. Most of the world doesn't know that salvation is wholeness. Because salvation in the Greek comes from two words, sozo, which is wholeness, or soterion, which means to be saved from temporal issues. So they don't realize it's bringing the Hebrew root of shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. So when you bring in the wholeness of God, but what we thought salvation was, we're getting saved from that stuff. No, real wholeness is being saved from your religion.
Thank you.
Yes.
And what they called salvation really was not solve. That's what Marcus Borg talks about, to heal. You know, you don't need a healing. You need to heal the thing that you're looking at. You need to heal the way you're looking at it. But what I grew up with was not salvation, it was salvaging. Let's just cope a little longer. I remember reading books in the 80s, how to cope with depression. I didn't even know I had all them things. They told me how to cope with them. The word kairos often means a decisive point. And get this, it's interesting. You're strong, poor brother. He said of uncertain derivative. They don't know where it comes from. That's a lie. There was a Greek mythology cult called Kairos. It come out of Greek mythology. But your Strong's brother didn't want to tell you that. It says of uncertain derivative. And I mark all kinds of stuff over that. Liars! No, I'm just kidding. I put another word Lynn uses right beside it.
Yes, yes.
So we are being caught up into the dance, which is the Greek word paraparesis. The Greek word paraparesis is the sharing and the fellowship of the Spirit, and that is a word that means the mutual sharing of a divine union that's marked by inner penetration.
Yeah.
I'll read that again. A mutual sharing of divine union that's marked by divine penetration. You know the word fellowship in the Greek means intercourse?
Yes.
I preached that one time. They were not happy. Al Dillinger said, we are included in the omnipresence of God. God is never absent from us, except in our beliefs that we are somehow separated from Him. The Hebrew word for grace, when Noah found grace, do you know what Strong said? I don't know how I got it. Objective beauty. Objective beauty. There is a beauty about you that no matter what you experience, it never changes. And Noah found it. Did he go out and build an ark? I don't know what he did, but he found grace, and that's the point of the message. And it suspended the laws of seed time and harvest, which means it suspended karma, and then after the boat, it went back. I submit to you, you can suspend whatever you sowed and reap if you'll understand grace.
Yes. Oh, that's good.
If you understand mercy. Now, I don't mean mercy as in what they told you the church was. Listen, if God is doing nothing but saving old, wretched sinners, the mercy is not an attribute of God because it can only happen in time. And that's the reason the Catholic Church is fighting over mercy, because the Pope declared it was your mercy, and they don't know what mercy is because they think mercy is for old, wretched sinners, and they think they're the elite, so now they got a problem. There's one mystery in the mysteries of time, and that's you. Mike Clegg says judgment only exists in time. One of the studies that you need to study and look into, and I'll write it on the board so we'll get more of it. My wife is welcome. I went that long? No, I'm just kidding. She's changing the seat. She's a lady of many words. The word decree and the word judgment. We have to understand that half of what we have called judgment should not have even been translated into our English Bibles. It should have been balanced. But there is a scripture understanding decree, and it's not your confession. It's understanding that something on the inside of you gets so big that you begin to decree it, and those words are connected to the Hebrew words for law. The law was not built so that you could experience it. The law was built so you could decree it. The law is not, you're not supposed to have, I can't believe I'm saying this, but here we go. You didn't get the law so it could serve God. You got the law because it serves you. Because it's cosmological law. It's not the law of Moses. And when you really understand you don't need law or grace, then you really get into the beauty of God. Because they're all steps. They're all layers. You know what? Half of the Bible is nothing but a dance of creativity and destruction in this dance that we call life. And that is the most beautiful thing in the world, because we're always trying to eliminate one instead of dance through it. And I thank God for every dance that I have, and the only way that dance can become, I can misstep. And how many of y'all know they've done a recent study of the greatest dancers of the world, and they said the most beautiful thing is when one would pull out, the other one pull them in. Your most beautiful thing is when you think you blew it and you're still dancing. That used to freak me out. Ron Bell in his book, what we talk about when we talk about God, he said, one time people said, well, the Lord really showed up, and he thought, I wonder where he's been if he's everywhere. We're a generation who's obsessed where God is rather than who God is. One's perception of God is brought about at a distance, and often people feel they need to be saved from God. In 2005, I did an exhaustive study on time, and I came to the conclusion we don't know who Christ is because we don't even know what time is. And then I began to study Hebrew, and I realized that the Hebrew word ruach is a living energy, a creative energy, the breath of creative intelligence. And we have to understand that half of what we have studied as the soul is not the soul, but it is a byproduct. In Hebrew thought, everything is energy. It's a verb. Your soul is not a noun. Your soul is a verb. And it's to be experienced. It's not for you to run around and diagram about, because as soon as you figure out one thing, then something else comes along. Emotions? Now, we use this in the negative. Something can happen to you as a child, and somebody walk up, say the wrong thing to you, and you will cry your eyes out. But if there's that kind of negativity, why can't there be that much creative power in the very word that's on the inside of you that you don't even need a Bible to know? In fact, I will submit this to you. You won't even fall in love with your Bible till you start understanding it's you. But I have met people in my lifetime who could sit there and prophesy the Bible word for word and could not read. Why? Because they had the inner book. You can't get that on Amazon. You can't look up Wikipedia and find out who you are. I drive a trash truck and I have young men that drive me crazy. Every time I tell them that, well, let me see something. Let me look up Wikipedia. I said, and I got to preach. I said, there are some things you can't find on Wikipedia. Somebody. Make me mad.
Brother, in 1955, only half of the world could read. I did a study, it's like in the 1600s, we're talking about only 15 to 20%. And that was, you know, when England come into power and they would begin teaching. For that, we're not talking about 10% of the, all these, before King James Bible come out, well, there wasn't a reason to read, you know, if you was a farmer, they taught you everything. But, so to push it as far as like a Bible, well, it was insane in the year 800 when 8% could read, you know, that wasn't even a thought. So,
but you know what they had? They were thinkers.
Yes.
You could read volumes out of the 18th century. They'll quote one Hebrew word and do 300 pages because they knew how to think. You know why we cannot? Dr. Robert Young was from Edinburgh. If you want to get into real theology, you got to get outside the United States because it can't be bought. Because we have been told not how to think, when to think, till we get to the extreme that there are women that when they step out of the box, we give them what category to step in.
Yep.
And if we've done that in the physical, what have we done to the feminine energy? In Genesis 1:2, and I won't do the Hebrew of verse 1, that's been done today, but the earth was formless and void. I read this in what's called the Quantum Translation by Jeff Benner, who also drops the vowel in the Hebrew, and he came up with this phrase. Now, let me give you this first. The Hebrew word there for, make sure I get this right, formless is the word tahu, is bahu, and bahu is the opposite that creates the unfathomable, uncomprehensive whirlpool of life. And then you have the other word, which is tahu. And Lynn, if you don't mind, give me that definition on the cesspool of the two words bahu and tahu.
The cesspool of creativity.
When I read that in Jeff Benner's, he said, everything is either ordered light or chaotic darkness. That's the cesspool of an energy that is constantly being created. Then I discovered something which is referred to in quantum mechanics as fractals. A fractal is anything, actually I'll give you the right definition here. A fractal is a natural phenomenon or mathematical set that exhibits a repeating pattern that displays on every scale. It is known as an expanding symmetry or evolving symmetry. The replication is exactly as the same on every scale. It is called a self-similar pattern. Fractal time, they think, was discovered when this guy discovered. Now I submit to you that fractal time has always been in the Hebrew, and it's when you find a code in the Hebrew text and it doesn't line up with the way you think, but you see the same pattern in every verse, in every verse, in every verse. And fractals, when I read this, the thing that really hit me was that that's what Tahu and Bahu is. It's a fractal. You can see perfect chaos and look like a disaster, and yet in it is a divinely beautiful pattern. That's why it's translated the good and the beautiful. Because what we've known as evil is us trying to take and change how we see the pattern instead of find the pattern and realize it's always been good, it's always been beautiful, there was no fall, and that what we consider as chaos or destruction has been a matter of time. Look back in your life. Look back in your life when you thought it was over. I had a pastor, this is no lie, I had a pastor, and when I went to that church, I asked God, I said, why here? This guy had just left the Assemblies of God. I said, why here? And I'm telling you, he was a coach in my life. I don't judge him because he pushed me to boundaries. But he had a relish for Greek and Hebrew. Looked like my whole plan fell apart. But yet, God was opening the doors for me to see things in a way that I've never seen things. You know what he said to me, Lynn? He walked over to me and he said, brother, let me tell you something. He said, you good at prophesying, anything comes in your spirit. You need to get in the Greek and Hebrew. He created a monster. I was normal till the end. I said, okay. And I started having question after question after question. Like that beautiful book. That's why I put this up here. Living the Questions. I love that. And by the way, that's the only book I ever saw that John Selby Spawn and Walter Brueggemann is on the same forward as the same book. So this has got to be good. Because the two don't actually hang around with each other. I have a list here of some of the notes. This is a free writing back there. We don't have a bunch of them. I infinitely know thyself. This is my definition of love in the Hebrew and the Greek. Let me give you a new one. The word love, one of the Aramaic words for love, is the word huba. We still having fun?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what we're here to do. And this will blow your mind, and I've got to find more about this because I love it. One of the Aramaic words for love is huba. And if you look that up, you Wikipedia people are going to find Hubastan, the rock band. This word means a passion that sets on fire, to become white hot with a passion that forges. Guess what the Aramaic word for sin is? One letter difference, H. Is that not beautiful? That the very thing that you thought was a sin that destroyed you was the thing that God was going to use to set you on fire.
Yes.
That's His breath. All right, I got a couple other things here. This is the dictionary I found at his house. Next, the dictionary of all scriptures of his, the G.A. Gaskell. Listen to this quote, and then I'm going to do my props. Max Mueller. Unless we learn to understand the metaphorical and hieroglyphic language of the ancient world, we will look upon the Upanishads and most of the ancient books of the East as mere childish swallow. It's a good quote. But I opened it up, I was going to talk about this anyway, and I found one part in there where he began to talk about the 4 levels of Jewish interpretation. Most people, 90% of people, read the Bible on a surface level only. That's the first level. The second level is that it hints to things. It's allegorical.
Yes.
We're just now training ourselves to think like that.
Yeah.
The next level is the types and the shadows and the symbols. And what's the 4th level? When you get into the deep that calls under the deep and not even words are used. And yet we think that Bible right there, 90% only read it on the surface. Well, brother, just do what it says. Okay. I used to have friends come over and ask me, Mark, can you find the Bible so that I can be with my wife and be with my girlfriend and do all kinds of freaky stuff? And I told them, I said, you're trying to find the Bible to conform to a box. And what most people know is they didn't need a verse, they were going to do it anyway. People say, your grace preaching is a license for sin. I said, they don't need one. But think about all the times, even in that we were both, quote unquote, experience and perceive failure, and we were victoriously being ushered into what we are right now.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
All right, here we go. Do some props. By the way, I erased this is, who's got a Stickman shirt that's up here?
John.
All right, come up, Suzanne. No, that's fine. The heart rim, you can just stand face in. See, this is the heart rim. This is the energy. It's the closest thing I can find. By the way, you see it spiraling energy?
Yes.
That's a fractal. Up through here, I couldn't find a big caduceus. They wouldn't give me one. But anyways, this is the rim. In here is contained the most precious thing you've ever experienced, which is what? Your soul and your ego, but also your heart. The Greek word translated as heart is a circle that has been broken. What is the heart rim? It's the connecting to the mind and to here,
Yes.
which is the two trees of life, but there's only one tree. When you get into the dance, this is the energy. The other day, I was sitting there, and I've heard this in this conference, the key of David, which is 444. I've also heard in Isaiah 53, it says, the sure mercies of David. So the key of David is the mercy of non-judgment. And I saw, as it were, this key, which is the Ruach of God, beginning to come in and unlock energies in our heart in this conference to awaken love. Till then, this thing, which is an orb, will no longer be here, but explode out, and you can begin to experience time and timelessness at the same time. Thank you. Then, this is even cooler, because I had one of these that I used at Barbara's conference, but I found one that spins. How many know that's Hebrew time? So when I began to see these, this, understanding that time is a cycle, is the key to unlocking your heart, because how many times you think, well, I'm facing the same thing over and over. Somebody said this, Dr. Robert Farrell, that till you transform your pain, you'll transmit it. May I submit to you that you're not experiencing the same thing over and over. You're experiencing fractal time, which is the most beautiful thing, because it's giving you an understanding of how to co-create. Because until you get rid of judgment, you will keep creating the same cycle. And listen, I got news for you. This time element, most of what we experience in time is not time, but psychological time. My wife has written a beautiful article here called Understanding Thyself. And I love it because for years I tried to understand. If you're under something, you're always going to be under it. But when you understand, you unlock your heart.
Amen.
And listen, I may not. Listen, I was up in the bookstore the other day. I was in Tupelo. And I found a book called Interterrestrial in Prophecy. And it had a UFO crashing into the cross. Now, I may say that I have no judgment, but I joke. I said, honey, we're going to buy this book. He said, I don't think so. And I'm joking with it until I left and thought, that's judgment. Why did I even look at it? Why did I joke about it? T.D. Jakes and Joyce Meyer's right beside it. I didn't pick it up and joke about it.
Yes.
See, we've got to be careful that the truth will come in a package we're not ready for.
Amen.
Now, I'm not going to announce to my hometown that I've decided, well, I guess I just did. But anyway. Oh, boy. How much time do I have? Oh, my gosh. All right, anybody wants to stand up, don't go nowhere, just fluff your pillow. Stand up and stretch, I got some more.
Wiggle jiggle time.
Wiggle jiggle, don't go nowhere. I'm gonna tell you.
I didn't snore, did I?
But you know, I tell you, I have more, those people there, I experienced more of God in those moments sometimes than I did the whole time I was at the Chinese, than I did at church. Because one of the things that I realized is those people were in my life for a reason. And that was to expose the religion in me. Now, I did do a few things I shouldn't have done. Like, I went to their home and they had a temple of Buddha, had fresh fruit, and I asked if I could have some. Don't do that. I'm not lying, I actually did that. The word creation in this article that was printed off so beautifully by Nick talks about that creation, as what we have understood it in the Bible, was a one-time event that was historical, and we're all trying to go through and understand chapters and verse. But science has realized that creation has layers. Now, I'm going to say something to just tell you how childlike my mind is, but ogres have legs. Now, nobody knows, that's Shrek. Anyways. The words here, let me give you Jeremiah 1:5. What I'm about to submit to you is not that I'm understanding all of this, because I don't. I'm understanding. Understanding means it's a paradox. And I love paradoxes. I used to hate them. I called them contradictions. I used to pray the devil out of my mind because I kept seeing so many. And let me tell you, you have to be called to do this. You have to have a passion to do the original language of the Bible. And if you don't feel anything led to them, I don't care if you don't feel led to pick up a Bible. Please do not. But if you're called to do this, you'll blow up and explode and be so frustrated until you do. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Now I understand there are people who don't do the Greek and Hebrew thing, and I'm telling you, that's totally cool with me. Because even people that don't do Greek and Hebrew often has understandings of verses that our concepts won't let us see. We're all a part of this. And I tell you, I'm looking forward to the diversity that we're yet to experience because, you know, I used to have people that were mad at me because I carried the Course of Miracles into a church. And then I had people that were mad at me because I carried the New Testament in a Course of Miracles church. So it's kind of crazy. Jeremiah 1:6, 1:5. Before I knew you, before I formed you, formed there is Yetzar. In the womb, I knew you. Knew is the Hebrew word Yada. Then you have the word that is used of bara. Now, these words, here's what people do. When they read these words, they're thinking physical, literal. But that's not true. Because that didn't come from a literal physical manifestation or even created as many of us think of created. That is an individualized consciousness of God in human form that's in the present moment. I love something a friend of mine, Marcus Hunt, says. I may not be all that God is in his complete, absolute fullness, but I can be all God is in the present moment.
Hallelujah.
So this is not a physical creation. Bara is that which is on the inside that comes on the outside. Yatsar, this word, Gary was telling me last night, even the Strong's got it right. It doesn't mean create, it means to be lowered into physical existence. Or as Alvin Boyd Kuhn said, spirit entombed in matter. But listen, we have to understand that spirit and matter is a dance.
Amen.
And when we try to eliminate one, we misstep in misunderstanding the dance. There's a Hebrew and Greek view of creation, and there's a Hebrew and Greek view of matter. And when you get into Greek thought, it's philosophical. Now, yada, this is a word that doesn't mean to know about God, it means to know God. But all these other Greek words are the Greek words used in the New Testament to describe creation. And what they're not talking about is creation in the sense of, and people ask me all the time, Mark, was everything created out of nothing, or was everything created out of something? I said yes and no. Because you're trying to get me into a box. And what we call creation is layers, because I submit to you that what was created is still creating. It's not stopped, because you are the emanation of God.
That's right.
And you wasn't created, you were lowered into a lower vibration, and you were sent here on purpose.
Amen.
Now some Hebraic people to the 18th century doesn't believe in the individualized self. In other words, and I have friends that believe that you are soul, but you didn't come into existence till you were born. Now, here's the thing that really gets me. Of all these different views, no one talks about this in the church. But yet in the 18th century, some of your leading Old Testament scholars had major debates. Were you individually outside yourself and you chose to incarnate, or were you chosen in Christ? And what gets me is that we have to understand that this is a dance of duality, that is a dance of contrast, and we try to separate, well, there was God and then there was us. You are one.
Amen.
Now, there are 10 views that I found that goes back to the pre-existence idea of the soul, and there's much more than that. Actually, I got 12. But I want to do this so you'll dig and you'll study, because until you begin to understand the soul, you'll never understand time. And until you understand time and timelessness, you will never unlock the dimensions of your heart and understand that this and this is the greatest measure of time. And yet most of Christianity cannot get it from here to here. They're expecting God to do something different. They're expecting their neighbor to do something, the devil to do something different, but it's right here.
Amen.
And I am responsible for right here.
Yes.
And anything outside of me is an allegory of what's in me. I don't care what it is. I sure do don't like Donald Trump. Well, you're looking at a reflection. I sure do don't like Donald Trump. Listen, I don't care what he does. It doesn't affect me. And more than likely, he's and listen, I don't keep up with no politics, okay? I am as dumb as rocks when it comes to politics. But I know enough to know that when people are being stirred up, they think, okay, he's causing trouble. When you have to understand that in many ways, that they're not even paying, people pay attention to him, but government isn't. If you really knew how deep this thing goes government-wise, you understand we're in the midst of a reset, and he's a distraction. And we have got to understand that most of what we have been looking at and judging as enlightened fundamentalists has been a distraction from the ultimate reset that's going to blow our minds. And I'm telling you, what are you going to do when Catholicism as a whole falls right before your eyes, just like the walls that separated East Berlin?
Yes.
What are you gonna do?
Amen.
What are you going to do when you got resources they kept for years from you?
Yes.
It's happening anyway. The internet, they told me, was 666. It's become my best buddy. I can find anything. I go to the first church of Amazon. Thank you. By the way, I want to tell you something. met the Archbishop of Love. And I got to know him, and he told me, you know a little Hebrew, you got to meet the cardinal. So, Lynn Harris is the cardinal. Barbara, you know I met you first. You know I kept you out of all that. She got in a meeting and said something about Elohim and Yahweh, and I said, I want more. She said, call his number. That was Lynn. There's 10 views of pre-existence for incarnation. The first one I heard years ago in the 90s by Miles Monroe. Then Carlton Pearson tweaked it, and he said that when you come into your body, you remember the person that you were created to be before you incarnated. And it said, if you will remember who you are. And Miles Monroe said, go back to the beginning before the beginning began. And that's when we all heard about purpose. The problem is that we thought purpose was something we do, not who we are. There you go. And the Greek says that. So purpose. And so then I began to read this, and I could read in Ephesians 1 that you were chosen in Him before the foundation of the world. You can read Genesis 1:1, then somebody go Genesis 1, John 1:1, and think it's the same creation. It's not the same at birthing. Most of you don't realize that logos comes from the Sanskrit word vak, which is the complete expression of God, an idealization expression. That comes from an old dictionary from the 1800s. In fact, I had done exhaustive studies on logos, and I'm convinced that logos is not a word. It is a formula. Just like if I drive down the road and I had KMTC, that is not a state. It is something I can tune to get to a sound. Logos is a sound. Not what you thought it was. It's the sound of your own heartbeat. Then a few years later, in my charismatic self, I met a man named David Hulse who says, you are God on assignment in this earth. First time I ever met David, I asked him if I could give a prophetic word, and I preached and shouted and cast out demons. He must have had a lot of grace. I'm glad he didn't judge me that day, because a few years later, I felt kind of weird. I was talking about rims, and somebody in the back thought I was talking about Krager's on a hot rod. And then I got introduced to Mark Sharona, who has been saying this. Mark Sharona was preaching on fractal gore in the early 80s. In fact, if you get his books by Destiny Image, before he ever connected with TBN, you'll find he's been preaching this stuff for years. Because he was exploring quantum physics. The first time I ever heard the term fractal glory. And then I met some other people. And when I begin to understand this, I understand that I am no longer, listen, I am no longer looking at the law as that it's something that comes and just puts me under bondage. It's something that helps me be victim to participant. Because the law was not created in order for you to be under bondage and point to something else. The law was a schoolmaster to connect you to that which you was before you got here. And now you're not a victim, you're a participant. And that's when you realize it no longer serves you. And you realize there's a cosmic law which the heavens declared in Psalms 19. Then you no longer look at the law as rules and regulations. You look at the law as a decree. Now, why would you say that God, the law serves you instead of you serve it? Because I'm in union with God, and there's not him and them, it's us. And if it's his law, spiritual law, you talk to most people in the United States and have them quote verses on the law, they will quote them wrong. In fact, that's where they'll get you stoned in most charismatic churches. Brother, I'm grace. Now, if you tell them that you don't need grace, they really lose it. But listen, it's not about this or that. It's understanding that when you know you are the breath of God, you understand that every person is in a different place than you, and you have that opportunity to show them. And I like what Lynn said about the two covenants. Because the problem has been what we thought about covenant, not about law. And I'll get into that later. Okay. There is a Hebraic idea of pre-existence that rolls all of these up into existence, And it was the combination of what the Plato and the Hellenistic people called the divine spark, and it's the Hebrew view of the soul, because you have to understand there's not God's soul in your soul, there's layers of soul, and we have to understand that if you go all the way back to Egyptology, it talks about the real thing that was the pre-existence, which was this thing called the Mayat, which is the scales of justice. So you did not incarnate to have judgment, you incarnated to have balance. In fact, you are the balance.
Yes.
You are the non-judgment. Nothing will change until you begin to see it differently. But then we begin to see this, and we come into these two words, which is the Greek word thelema and bilema. One word means divine purpose, divine law. And then you have this word which means process. And I will submit to you today that I absolutely, positively, without beyond a shadow of doubt, know that God loves you and He is one with you. But I am not sure of the process, because the process is still being played out in time. But you were sent here not as a victim, but as a person who will participate and be partakers of the divine nature. And no longer will ego and time be your hindrance, but your even what you call illusion will be your stepping stone.
Amen.
Oh, yes.
And so the phylema and bilema, this was what they told me years ago. Well, you got this one and this one, but they missed a word, and it's this word. I love purple. The Greek word, lego, used in Ephesians, says you're chosen in Him before the foundation of the world. Lego comes from logos, which is the heartbeat of God, which is the sound of God. So now I'm asking you, and listen, this is where I'm at. I don't know the full process of good and evil, but you know, use the word good and beautiful. And verb, everything is function. So it's functional good and functional beautiful. And what we have to understand in Hebrew thought is we've tried to dissect an understanding of knowing that is a verb. And when it is a verb, it is in the sense that you are experiencing this. And the more we experience, the more we have the emotions and the experience, the more we understand soul. And we're not going to try to confine this probe that I had earlier. The soul will no longer be condemned to the heart realm, but you will begin to see and experience it in everything. But yet it's all inside you.
Yes.
Yes.
The whole thing is inside of you. You say, I don't see how you can say that. Because most of what we have experienced, even yesterday, I was sitting there and I was going through this in my head, and then it dawned on me, the only person in the room was me. And I'm having a dialogue with myself about myself. That's insanity. Only religion could do that. That's not metanoia, that's paranoia. And that's when it dawned, I was sitting there and I said, I know this, but sometimes you just got, I said, who are you to question? I don't know who is, but in that moment, regardless of how you interpret spirit, soul, body, there's one thing you cannot deny, is before you come on this planet, you are the Ruach breath of God. A friend of mine called up a Jewish community center, but sometimes that can be a negative thing. But he called him up and he said, I want to know how you pronounce the name of God. And the guy said,
Wow.
and he said, oh no, I'm wanting the word. He goes, it's a breath.
Yes.
And when you start looking at things in Hebrew thought, you're no longer trying to dissect the spirit and the soul. You are experiencing it, and you know that when you experience, I don't care if you heard something 15 years ago on the inside of you, you can experience it today the same as you did then, because there is no time except the cycles of time that work for you instead of against you.
Yes.
I am no longer trying to get doors to open up. I am no longer trying to get this or that to happen because I'm realizing that I'm in a cycle and that which I am even struggling with is collapsing. Ascension will collapse time, but it will first collapse your view of time. And when you realize that, you realize the very time that has put you into prison is the very time in which you were incarnated to change. So how dare you call it an illusion? It is not an illusion, it is a transition because of his breath.
Oh,
And I'll have to pick this up later, so back to you.